Well, our next guest is Sama Salimi-Sadi. She was raised in the underground church in Iran. Her pastor father was a convert from Islam, and he was repeatedly imprisoned for his Christian faith. From time to time, her entire family arrested, interrogated, threatened. In 2016, they made a daring escape. She tells her family's story in a book called Sama, A Modern Exodus, and welcome to the 700 Club. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is a critical time for Iran. So tell me, what's it like on the ground there? What are people going through as they face these uncertain times?
It's, as you also mentioned, it's a very critical time. And I have to say, after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, life completely changed in Iran. People lost their freedom, and the strict Islamic rules were forced on people. And the situation became very, very difficult. And it's been now 47 years that the people of Iran have not been able to live the life they want to live. They have not been free to say what they think, to express what they believe, and to even choose what to wear. Can you imagine living in a country that you can be sentenced to death simply because you love Jesus? Can you imagine living in a country that I myself, as a woman, that I was arrested simply because, I hadn't covered my hair properly, and a man with shorts on the street can be arrested? So even at our weddings, the police can attack to a wedding because according to the Sharia law, women and men cannot celebrate and party together. So
not even at a wedding?
No. So, in Iran, the Islamic regime controlled all aspects of Iranian people's life, politically, financially, spiritually, socially, and this was just a burden on people in Iran. And how do they feel? They feel exhaustion, they feel frustrated, and they feel being trapped. And now people are rising on the street, not because they want unrest, but because everyday life has become impossible for these people. Prices climb, the currency collapses, and work no longer guarantees survival. Why? Because the Islamic regime of Iran, instead of using all the national assets and wealth and national resources for developing the country, started to make weapons to fight with whom? With the hypothetical enemies outside Iran. And now people who came to the street to protest peacefully, their voices answered with bullets. Some reports say that 40,000 people were killed. Some people say 50,000. Some people say 75,000 people were killed on the street simply because they were on the street to protest, to ask for their right peacefully. And I can say this is a massacre, and this is the second Holocaust in Iran that we are experiencing. And people are kidnapped in Iran.
Well, why do you think? It doesn't seem like the Western world is awake to this. We had some massive protests at the security conference in Germany. There was similar protests in Toronto and in Los Angeles. But it seems to be the expat Iranian community coming together, but they don't seem to be joined by anybody else. Why do you think that is?
You mean the Iranian people, the allies that are...
Yeah, why aren't more what I would call Western democracies joining with you to say, this is absolutely horrific. This shouldn't exist on our planet. This needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know what? The people of Iran, first of all, I have to clarify this. The war is not against Iran, is for Iran. And the Iranian people are not the Islamic regime. These people are the victims of the Islamic regime, and this nation have been held hostage for decades. So I believe this is a rescue mission for this nation. And we all need to stand for the people of Iran, according to the scripture. In Proverbs chapter 31, verse 8, we read that speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Speak up and judge fairly. So I believe if one part suffers, every part will suffer. So we all need to stand with the people of Iran. And historically, we see that when the situation in a country gets that bad, the intervention of other countries is a must, is a beautiful action. Look at the scripture in the Old Testament when Jewish people were in captivity. The king of Iran, Cyrus the Great, made these Jewish people free and gave them the budget to go and build their own temples. So I think now we all are called to take an action for Iran and stand with these people.
As a woman, tell us, what's it like to be a woman in that culture? I've heard the stories of, people that were traveling on a plane from Europe to Tehran, and it was absolutely amazing the transformation that happened in the last half hour of the flight. They'd get on the announcement would come, we're half hour out. Suddenly all the women would spring into action, and all the headscarves come out, and the makeup comes off, and they transform themselves in order to be acceptable when they land. So what's it like? Do you ever have a sense that you can be free outside your home?
I myself have been arrested a lot of times simply because I didn't get dressed the way that the Islamic regime wanted me to get dressed. So we, as women in Iran, had no right to choose what to wear. And not only, the way that we got dressed was being controlled, even me as a Christian woman, wherever I went to work, I was fired simply because I was a Christian, and they want the Muslim women to work. So I myself as a Christian woman, I experienced all kind of harassment, and so no rights for the women. And according to Sharia law, so women usually are, always actually, not usually, are just for the use of men, and they are worthless. And so the situation is even more critical for the women. And I remember at a school, so this is not only for women or men, at a school when we were growing up, we were forced to read the Quran and to learn about Sharia law in Arabic by force. So Arabic is not our language. Farsi, Persian is our language. And we were forced to shout some slogans to say, death to America, death to Israel. Why? And if we didn't follow the rules, we could be punished badly. So we grew up in this situation. And so it was just hostage, as I said. We were all kidnapped in Iran, and still.
Your father was a pastor, which I just find amazing. And he went through obvious persecution, arrest, imprisonment, solitary confinement, all of that. As his daughter, what was it like for you watching that happen?
So, as I mentioned earlier, after the 1979 century Islamic Revolution, life completely changed in Iran. And it was in that situation, it was in 1982, that my father gave his heart to Jesus Christ. And a few years later, I was born into this time of control. A time when many Muslim background believers were arrested. A time when many of our pastors were martyred, were killed, assassinated, and disappeared in Iran. Growing up, I witnessed so many attacks to our house and privacy on routine basis. The security authorities would raid our house and would confiscate all the Christian items. I was only 6, but I remember each attack to our house clearly. I used to crawl under the bed to hide with fear, trembling. However, I was witnessing everything. And in that little kid's mind, there were tons of questions like, where do they take Daddy? Why do they arrest him? Why do they handcuff him and pull his weak body aggressively on the ground? Why do they beat Mommy? Why do they hit her? And why she gets up and follows them and begs them to stop? With all those things in my mind, I still believed that my father was the strongest man in the world, and he would come back home. But it was just the beginning. The killing silence after each attack was even worse. Walking in the house was like walking in a battlefield. Everywhere, everything was a mess. And I remember my mom would sit in a corner crying silently. And as a kid, I would go to my mom and say, Mom, why don't we call the police to save us from these bad people? And I didn't know that these guys are the police themselves. They were supposed to protect us, but they raided our house every now and then.
You wrote a book about your exodus from Iran. You got out in 2016. Let's just talk about why did you, obviously we know why you left, but where did you go and what was it like leaving that oppression to now freedom?
Okay. So, you know, after each attack that, the security authorities would raid our house, this tragedy happened again and again in my life for over 30 years. It was just not like a day or, it happened regularly. In 2009, we decided to reopen one of the Anglican churches in Isfahan city in Iran. It was called St. Paul, and that church was abandoned for 40 years. This reopening and refurbishment renewed pressure against us, especially my father, as well as with the work with the house churches in Iran, the underground churches, and the Christian books and poetry that my father had written. And because of that, when my father was going to Dubai to be ordained as a priest, he was taken and his passport was confiscated. In Iran, as Christians, we can not get baptism or confirmation or ordination publicly. We needed to go to another country to be able to do our Christian service and ceremonies. They didn't let my father go, and they banned the passport for several years. Right after what happened at the airport, they raided our house again. But this time, when they handcuffed my father and they beat him and, took him with themselves, for almost a month, we had no idea where my father was. We didn't know even if he was alive. We didn't know how he was doing. It was only me and my mom, and we would go to bathroom to pray quietly because we were so scared to be heard by them. Everything was under their control. Our telephones were under control. Our house was under control. We were being followed everywhere, and their shadows would follow us everywhere. And even our friends and relatives would avoid us because they were scared to be in contact with us. It could be dangerous for them. One of those unforgettable days, I received a phone call from the intelligence police. They gave me an address, and they wanted me to go to that address. And I do not know how I got myself there. And on the way, I was thinking, what are they going to do with me? Are they going to hurt me, or are they going to imprison me, or are they going to give me my father's lifeless body? With all those thoughts in my mind, I found myself in front of a big iron door, and upon mentioning my name, they let me inside. And after going through a few different corridors, they wanted me to go inside a room, sit on a chair, face toward the wall, and they closed my eyes with a blindfold. They interrogated me in that room from morning till night, and it was the same day that I experienced inappropriate behavior that crossed my physical boundaries. And I cried that day, the whole day, until, crying was not allowing me to talk anymore. But there was a good thing there. My father was still alive. That was the good thing. They kept my father in the solitary confinement for 3 months. When I'm talking about a solitary confinement, I'm talking about a very small room there is no light, no window. You do not know when is a daytime, when is a nighttime. And so you can only sit or lay down. You cannot even walk. And no soap, no towel, backed up toilet, I'm sorry, and roaches everywhere, and a watery meal once a day. And we were convicted of apostasy, blasphemy, anti-governmental activities, writing Christian books and poetry, evangelism. In Iran, when they want to punish you, they do not say you are a Christian and they punish you. They label you as Zionist. And this is what they told us, that you are Zionist. Finally, after a lot of negotiation, they released my father on bail. But, our cases were still open, and we were waiting for our punishment. It was in this time that my father's doctor told me, Sama, your father is not young anymore. And you need to take care of him. If he will be arrested and go to the solitary confinement again, it is going to be his last time. It was a warning for me, and I said, okay. I sat with my father and said, Dad, look, I know that you are against leaving Iran, abandoning Iran, but we are in danger. And you are not young anymore. It's been like more than 30 years that we have been serving here. But even in the Bible, it is written, if they do not accept you, shake off the dust of your feet and leave. And my father, strongly believed that he was called by God to serve the Iranian underground churches. But finally, when he realized that we are also in danger and anything can happen to us, we decided to escape Iran, to flee Iran. And we went to Turkey and we registered and opened a case in the United Nations as asylum seekers there. This is how we decided to get out of Iran.
All right. The rest of the story is in Sama's book. It's called Sama, Modern Exodus, and she hasn't left Iran in her heart. She's currently working with a ministry dedicated to encouraging the underground church, the Christians there. And here's some good news to this whole story. Iran has the fastest growing Christian population in the world. There's over 1 million Christians now. People are leaving the Muslim faith because of what they see that theocracy doing. I encourage you to get the book, Sama, Modern Exodus. It's available wherever books are sold. Thank you for your life. Thank you for your testimony.